What's up, guys, and welcome back to a brand new episode of the NeoVintage podcast. I'm Jerome, and I'm here with
Steve. Hope everyone's doing well out there.
And for you guys who have never seen the show before, we're just two guys that like to talk over the biggest stories in gaming, but we always like to start with what we've been playing. So, Steve, what you been playing?
So yeah, just pretty much two things. One I'll get out the way pretty quickly. Through forces unknown to me, I have Modern Warfare 2. I have the Modern Warfare 2 reboot, and I didn't do the early access. I didn't play the campaign early or anything like that. So just kind of starting it. I really just spent a few hours with it. I agree with everyone. First off, that the UI is the worst thing I've ever seen. Super confusing. It's just, man, it is really bad. But when it comes down to the game, I spent a little time in multiplayer. Obviously, it's not a huge thing for me. I wasn't even really, not that I wasn't a fan. I just didn't have a PlayStation when Modern Warfare, the original Modern Warfare 2 came out, so I don't have like the super nostalgic feeling for it. But I was a big fan. Actually, you sold me on the reboot of Modern Warfare, campaign. And so I was tempted to check this one out and ended up obviously getting into it. Multiplayer is, as of right now, just Call of Duty multiplayer. There are some really cool maps, I think, that are designed. I do like the unlocking feel in a world that is just slammed with pay to win and even pay to unlock. It is cool to just unlock attachments, like kind of in an old fashioned way. There is going to be a battle pass. There is like a shop section that's not active yet. I'm not sure if they're waiting to integrate Warzone 2.0 into that, which is also not live. So right now it's just multiplayer and the campaign. So it's hard for me to just like talk much about it when it is just Call of Duty. It is another Call of Duty game in the multiplayer aspect. There is a few new game modes that I've noticed. Is like this one where you have to, it's very familiar from like Halo, where you have to like hold the skull for points. This one is different. You hold like a bag of money, and I'm sure this mode's been in and out of Call of Duty. It's just I haven't played consistently Call of Duty multiplayers. But the gunplay obviously is really solid. The game I kind of was hoping would look better. There are certain scenes and clips that look really good, but I do think it's time that this engine is really on its last leg. It's to the point where it's like this looks like a game from a couple years ago. It runs great, it runs smooth on Series X, but I just don't feel like it looks as good. And I've even checked seen clips and things like that on PC where it just doesn't just look like this engine is tapped out. It's time for them to really revitalize that. The campaign is solid. We're continuing the story from a couple of years ago. I'm not gonna get too much into it. Obviously, it is a Call of Duty game. It's a war game. In the Modern Warfare sequel, it's cool to see this reboot of characters and cast that people really seem to love in the original two games. To see them in a different light, obviously we have some changes and things like that. So it's pretty fun. Overall, it is exactly what I expected, and it's probably exactly what everyone expects. It is Call of Duty. There is that third-person mode, which it's locked to a specific mode. Super weird. It's super weird because it plays like Call of Duty, but it's in third person. But it's kind of weird when you try to aim down sights. It's like a weird experiment for some reason. I would definitely suggest people to just take a look at it because it is very jarring. I'm not even sure what it's there for. But all in all, it's solid, and I think everyone knew the game would be solid. I don't know how the story obviously ends up. The game just launched. I know the campaign's been available for like a week, but the full game just launched, so I'm trying to take my time with it. No real reason to rush through it. I know it's probably not the longest journey, but it's solid though. I am having some fun with it, which really comes down to that. So I'll have maybe more to say on it next time. I'll probably be done with the campaign. I might be done playing multiplayer by that point. And again, I've never been huge into Warzone, but I'll probably check it out just because it is installing. I think you're stuck installing it. We all found out really recently that obviously the physical disc, I don't know if you've actually heard this, but the physical disc to Modern Warfare 2 only has about 80 megabytes of data on there.
Wait, what?
So if you buy a physical disc of Modern Warfare 2, and I know this is the case on PlayStation, I'm assuming it's the same on Xbox, there's only 80 megabytes of data on there, so it's just a launcher. So you still have to download the whole game. So I just got the game digitally because
that's so weird.
I was like, there's no justification, and they've confirmed it. That everything's been confirmed. People have ripped the disc. There is nothing on the disc but basically a key access to let you download the game digitally. So there's no point in buying this game physical out there. For anyone out there, just get it digitally if you want the game at all.
Yeah.
It's the same price everywhere. It's so weird. What a weird thing to do.
And those games are big too, right? From what I understand, like they're huge.
If I remember, it was 130 gigs.
Wow.
I had to do because it does a campaign, does multiplayer, and I think it's pre-installing Warzone 2, even though that's not accessible yet.
Can you segment it, like only download campaign?
You can,
right?
yeah, it does. It does let you do that. When you first load it up to download, it's like, do you want to do this, or this? I just clicked it all because I have enough space for it.
Yeah.
But my goodness, when I heard about that disc thing, I didn't think it was true, but it is true. So for all you out there who, sometimes getting the disc helps you save on memory, that's not going to be the case this time. So be careful out there.
Or the secondhand copy people like me. That's kind of tricky.
Yeah, exactly. So it is kind of tricky. I don't even know how that. I guess I don't even know how that works. Yeah, I don't know if it just still allows you to download it. It is a tricky situation there. So definitely look into that before just going and getting a secondhand copy. I'm sure it works, because I'm sure it would be a bigger dilemma if it didn't. But it is just still something to be wary of. Because I think it's like something like 78 megabytes is on the disc.
That's insane.
It's just a launcher, so it is pretty crazy. But the other thing I've been playing also was just this recent weekend that was released. Shadow of Rose, the Resident Evil Village DLC, was released. A nice little, I think it's like a $20 expansion. If you have the base game, I think it's bundled for $40 if you don't have the base game. Obviously, I had the base game, so I just got the DLC, which I think it brought some extras to the mercenary modes and a few other bonuses. But obviously, the main thing I wanted to play was the story expansion where you play. And I guess it's not really spoilers since it's in the trailers and everything, where you play as Ethan's daughter. And I thought it was continuing from the ending of Resident Evil Village. It's actually in between the ending of it's between the end of the game and the final cutscene of the game, where again it's hard not to say spoiler warning when in the trailers you obviously Ethan's daughter. You see her at the end of the game in Village. It's before that scene. It's before she gets picked up in a van. This is all before that, actually, where I thought it was going to be reversed. I thought it was going to take place after that scene. So it's after the end of the game, but before the last cutscene we saw in the original story. And it's really solid. I didn't know what to expect when I saw it was just a $20 expansion and they were bundling this other stuff. I knew it would probably be pretty short. I beat the whole campaign, I think under 3.5 hours. So it is pretty short. A couple cool little things. It's fun. You obviously are retracing some of your steps from the main campaign. But it was pretty fun to go back to the castle. It was fun to visit the village in a sense. It is really it's in both senses that in story wise it's fun to see that stuff. But also I have not played that game since it launched. I was never really trying to for any reason. So it is fun. It evolves the story a little bit. It does kind of almost even retcon a few things that I guess they were having issues with. And it doesn't really, because they're amping this up to be the end of the Winter Saga, which would obviously be Resident Evil 7, 8, and now this DLC. But there's still a few things left unanswered. There is not a real tease to a Resident Evil 9, which I know right now we're all focusing on the remakes and everything that's coming out. So at some point there will be, I guess, a next Resident Evil. I don't know how it's going to tie into that. But there's a few cool little things they play with. Obviously, I have the same feeling toward the DLC that I did toward the main game, that the castle and the haunted house sort of dollhouse chapter were pretty much the best parts of Resident Evil Village. And it kind of echoes and reflects in this as well, where being in the castle and then in a similar style, it's not the same thing, there is a similar puppet house type deal with some really creepy elements that just, those middle sections of this DLC is phenomenal. And it's really good, and it's interesting to see Capcom still be able to do such a nice twist of horror that feels so different even though it is under the, no pun intended, under the umbrella of Resident Evil. I don't think I think it's pretty much well known that 7 and 8 are just very loosely connected to the Resident Evil universe as of now. So it is interesting that they play with some stuff. It almost felt like I wished that there was no combat in this, because you are obviously playing with a couple different puzzles and abilities, Rose being who she is, and the events that happen in the village lead up into some of these abilities and things like that. I almost wish that gunplay was removed and focused more on sort of puzzles and a few other abilities that she has. So it is interesting that they kind of felt shoehorned to give her a pistol and a shotgun, basically. When I feel like it would have been more impactful, her not having this, especially her being, I believe at this time, a 15, 16-year-old girl. So it is fun. I think it is weird that they really showcase this as, again, like I said, an end cap to the Winter Saga, where it does not feel like that, though. It just doesn't feel like you got the payoff, or the sort of, this is the end and I'm okay with the next one sort of not continuing this. So it is kind of weird. I thought it was fun, though. I thought it was solid. I actually thought Rose was going to be sort of a one-dimensional generic character, and there is some of that, especially when you just look at her as a character. She's just a blonde woman, black hat, and this big coat. Like, you don't see much of who she is, so that does feel a little unfortunate. But all in all, I think it was a fun way to finally end off Village, I guess, because there was always this sort of mystery of where the game was going to go, and I guess you have sort of a clearer concept of where that goes, depending on what they were to do with eventually Resident Evil 9. But all in all, I think it's a solid DLC, especially if you haven't revisited. I haven't tried the new third-person mode for the full game. I think a lot of the charm in Village is that first-person perspective. This DLC, you are forced to play in third-person, which there's some give and take. You still control like if you were first person, so your model looks a little weird when you're walking, because you feel like the game shouldn't be that way. So there is a little weird stuff. So I'm not sure how that will translate to the full game, but all in all, I think it's solid, especially if you're a diehard fan of Resident Evil like I am, and specifically these last two games. It does fit in well with that. So that's all I've been up to. The kind of taking up my weekend between these two games. What have you been up to?
Yeah, I haven't played a ton in terms of different types of games lately, but the first one I'll get out of the way. I tried Plague Tale Requiem last night. Now, caveat on this is I was not really that into the first one. I really tried. Like I've tried actually like several times to try to get into that game, and I couldn't do it. But I had seen so many really cool gameplay moments from the second one that I was like, I really do want to give this a shot. So I played very little of it. I played like maybe 10, 15 minutes of it, and I was just super off it already. It's one of those things where I just get really bored and annoyed by these games for some reason. I don't know why. And so I had to check out again. So it's not really for me. Game looks good though, runs good. It's a nice little game on Game Pass for anybody on the Xbox ecosystem who's looking for something new to play. But I can't report too much back there because I did not get much into the story. So I dabbled with that. And then I just ended up going back to the main game that I've been playing a lot of, which is Gotham Knights. And obviously that's gotten quite a mixed reception, I would say, bordering towards negative in some circles. And I think when talking about this game, kind of the most helpful thing is to first establish what it is, because I feel like a lot of people don't really know what Gotham Knights is, or at least is trying to be, and I think that's what leads to a lot of confusion. So I think the first thing for anybody who's not playing this game is to divorce it from the Arkham games, and I think that WB could have done a better job doing that, because it's not incredibly clear. A lot of the characters, part of the kind of rogues gallery of Batman's world, have a lot of proximity and similarities to their Arkham counterparts. Obviously, WB Montreal has that connection to the Arkham franchise through Arkham Origins, but they've always obviously the Arkham series is Rocksteady's thing, so they kind of already were on the outs there. And then when this came out, I don't think they said it was its own thing, but there was so many connections to the Arkham game. A lot of people made that connection there. Obviously, some the combat style was reminiscent of it. But like I have to make it clear, as somebody who's played maybe 15 to 20 hours of it already, this is in no way an Arkham game. It's pretty devoid of all the things that I feel like kind of made that game great. And this game is a lot closer actually to Saints Row and Gotham. Literally, like it's closer to a Saints Row and Gotham. It's closer to a Ubisoft game. It's very checklisty in the way that there is kind of a constant stream of activities to do around Gotham, that as you do them, they give you different gear, different abilities that you can unlock, and you can really kind of, it's very modular in your character in terms of the gear that you assign and can craft and stuff like that. And you just get better and better gear and stronger character. And as you accomplish activities, they're called challenges, I believe, you get points basically that lend themselves to unlocking new crimes, because you'll get information from stopping crimes that indicate other premeditated crimes that will occur in the future. And so you just kind of do that over and over again while different stories unlock. You have a kind of a centralized story of the main game, and then also you have what they're called case files on different enemies. This is not really big spoilers because they're obviously right there at the intro. You'll get stuff with like Harley Quinn. You'll get stuff with Mr. Freeze or Clayface, for example, and they'll have their own dedicated case files, and you kind of do that. And the way it works is between every case file mission, there'll be pretty large jumps in the level range of what you should be. So like this level's for like 18 to 21, and the next one is for like 24 to 25. And so in between, its expectation is either you're jumping between case files and doing like story missions and then case file missions, or you're doing activities inside, and that'll kind of keep you getting leveled up. So if you're really looking for like a time killer to kind of mindlessly go around Gotham and just like kill time, kind of like a Saints Row or a Ubisoft game, I think this game is like perfect for you. But I can totally understand why people find it grindy as hell, because again, there are these level spikes, so you're kind of required to do something, whether that's and you can't really mainline the story, or you're going to end up being in a position, I feel like, where you're going to be under leveled. It's not that I think the game is designed bad, but I think it's designed to have you flow in between things. It's not that like the main story is surrounding, for anybody who doesn't know, again, not a spoiler, this is what was in the trailers, it's surrounding the Court of Owls. And the thing about it is it's kind of hard to mainline because of the way it's designed. So you have to kind of jump in between, where you do a mission furthering that, and then you kind of do some odds and ends where you'll break up some like bank robberies or kidnapping, or you'll stop a truck, armored truck stealing thing. There's different activities around the world you do. You can investigate murders, sometimes not nearly as interesting as it sounds, and then eventually you kind of just progress the story to the point that you keep going. And for anybody who's kind of curious about how good the narrative is, because the gameplay doesn't sound that interesting, if you're like semi-familiar with like Scott Snyder's comic book run, it's the huge run that happened during the New 52 era that a lot of people know about, that kind of introduced the concept of the Court of the Owls. If you're familiar with that at all, you pretty much know the story of this game. It's not a massive departure from that. You play as the Gotham Knights, or the four characters. You'll have Batgirl, Tim Drake's Robin, Red Hood, and Nightwing. You choose one of those four characters, and you kind of go along with that. And it's up to them to kind of hold down Gotham in Batman's absence. And I'll kind of leave that there. Cool thing about it is every character has a very distinct style at the very least, and I'll commend them for that, where it's like, it's not just kind of like a palette swap where it's like you just choose whatever character is kind of your favorite. Every character plays very distinct from one another, so it lends itself to different gameplay styles. So if you're a lot slower of a character player, and you prefer like stealthier, like you prefer not to engage large groups if not necessary, then you're gonna love like Tim Drake, for example. He's great with that, and all of his abilities that you unlock kind of make it good for that. If you're really into like almost like a Watch Dogs style gameplay, where you're good to fight groups, but you love to like pick people off by like hacking different devices. And you also have infiltration abilities that the cameras can't spot you and stuff like that because of like digital ghosting things. That's where Batgirl goes in. If you love group combat where you kind of just go in blazing, destroying everybody, where you can go from character to character, like the enemy to enemy, bouncing all over the place, great drop-in. That's where Nightwing comes in. And then Red Hood has excellent DPS and has really good range play. So there'll be moments where you can jump in, and since he has guns, he can kind of shoot everybody around him where nobody can get really close to you if you know what you're doing. And so there's cool motivation to play as different characters and try to feel it out. That's what I did. Is I played at all four, decided I landed on Batgirl personally, which I was actually really leaning towards for a while, Nightwing, but then actually the digital ghosting mechanic made certain activities a lot easier that I just kind of preferred Batgirl. But there is good motivation to play as everybody. No character is like trash, which is really good. And there's kind of a benefit to everything. So yeah, overall, I would say I like the game, but is it like great? It's hard for me to say that. It kind of it depends on, it's like really depends on the player. Like if you like Ubisoft check boxy games that you like get kind of lost in the world and like slowly do activities all around the world constantly, and if you really like Batman and you're kind of like down for anything Batman, anything Rogues Gallery, then I think you can really get like a kick out of this game. But I would say for the average person, probably wait for this to go on sale, and it definitely will. We're right around Black Friday, so this is definitely going to go down to $40, $35 probably, and I think that's a great range for it. I think this retailed at $70. It may be $60, but I think it retailed at $70. That is fine for me because I'm getting a lot of gameplay out of it, but for overwhelming majority of people, I think that's way too much money to spend on this game. Even 60 is too much. So if you can find it on sale, I would recommend it. It also, and then, sorry, I'm going long here, but Gotham Knights also doesn't run great. That's another big thing to mention. It has the 30 FPS cap. Everybody talks about that. It very noticeably, when you're specifically driving around the world, doesn't always hit that, and there's a lot of clipping, and the world kind of gets jittery. I haven't had straight up crashing issues that some people have had. I have never crashed once, but when you're on the bat cycle and you're moving around the city, I do get some considerable stuttering at times. It hasn't impacted like gameplay at all. Like I've been able to I've never like died or like messed up a mission or missed a turn or anything like that because of the jitteriness, but it doesn't feel great. And it's kind of weird experience to be playing on a PlayStation 5 and having a game stuttering at 30 frames per second. It's very off-putting and weird because the game doesn't look particularly like current gen at all. It looks like a PS4 game generally and runs like a PS3 game. And that's weird. Weird feeling because the frame rate is not 60, which in this day and age, I think a lot of us have kind of come to expect at this point now. So even if the visuals are not the best, everybody kind of expects a performance version where you can kind of crank down the resolution if needed to like whatever 1080p, 900p, whatever. But you got that 60 frames per second. Well, this one is like both, where it's like it's visually okay, but it doesn't look necessarily any better than what you like Arkham. It looks kind of better than Arkham City or Arkham Knight. I mean, what was the last one? The 2015 one, was that Arkham City?
The last Arkham game?
Yeah, the last one.
Arkham Knight. Yeah,
so it looks better than Arkham Knight in terms of visual fidelity, but it's less stylized, so the art style's worse, if that makes sense. So like it's higher resolution, but it doesn't look as good. Runs terribly. So that's just a weird position where you're on the same console that is playing, Horizon Forbidden West and Last of Us 2 in such an incredible, and Last of Us 1 remake, like these incredibly powerful games. God of War is about to come out, and then you have this game that looks worse than them and runs way worse than them. So it's kind of like, what is so demanding about this game? I don't know. I don't know. I'm not a game developer, so I can't tell you why. But it's kind of mind-boggling to be playing on this console, and the load times are longer too. So part of me, there's actually a theory going around that this is actually the PS4 version that they are marketing as a PS5 version, and
I've heard that too.
And to be honest with you, having played this game, do I necessarily feel like they did that? I don't know. Part of me feels like that's maybe a little bit more insidious than they're actually doing. It might just be a really poorly optimized game, but it totally feels like that. It totally feels like a last gen version of a game. It's like when you download a PS4 game on PS5 and the load times are not great because it's not optimized, and it doesn't run the best because it's not optimized. That's what it feels like, an unoptimized PS4 game, which is insane in 2022 for a game that was in incubation for so long. We've known about this game for a while, and I'm pretty sure that it experienced some significant delays as well. And then for it to come out and be in this shape from a team that is not a new team, like they've dealt with this before too. And Origins had its technical issues and design issues, and it's not my favorite game in the world, but it's just really surprising that the game is in the state that it's in. And right before Gotham Knights came out, like maybe days before, I fired up Arkham Knight on Xbox just to like refamiliarize myself. And God, does that game hold up. Like, it's insane how well that game holds up. Like, that's from 2015, but like if you clean that up and got like 4K on it, like 4K visuals, or like just up-resed it to match current gen specs, that game would feel brand new to me. Like, it doesn't feel old at all, and it would be definitively better than Gotham Knights, which is insane and kind of sad that a game 7 years old with an up-res is like unequivocally better than everything about Gotham Knights. It's kind of sad, but I do recommend people check it out if they're into Batman. Just try to get it on a sale. But yeah, that's pretty much everything I've played. I've pretty much spent all my recreational gaming time on Gotham Knights just because I feel like it's a great time sink. Like, I just like put on a podcast and just destroy the world, and then when it's story time, I'll put my headphones in. But overall, I think it's a cool time sink, and I'm kind of just killing time until God of War comes out, to be honest with you. And Bayonetta I'm gonna play later this year. So right now it's kind of just like God of War. Eventually I'll play Pokemon, and then Gotham Knights until then. So yeah, that's where I'm at.
No, yeah, I was interested in hearing your thoughts on it, because Gotham Knights, I know it's had its issues up to its release, especially, a week before you launch, you tell people, oh yeah, by the way, the consoles are locked at 30.
Yeah.
And even past that, I've seen gameplay on PC, and it's just not that stable. Which for some reason we kind of knew. I mean, it was Rocksteady who had that issue with Arkham Knight on PC.
Yeah.
I don't believe Origins, which was their previous project, I don't think that even released on PC. So it is kind of sad to see, but there is something. Me being a huge comic fan and specifically really liking the Bat family, there's something that is calling to me about this game where I want to play it so bad. I think about it like, man, if I got 15 hours through Saints Row, I could probably have way actually more fun in this universe. I do like some of the stuff. Again, I have not played it, but I do like some of these costumes I've seen, and some of the customization looks to be, obviously huge throwbacks to certain comics and certain runs.
Yeah.
So there is a lot more calling to me in this game than in Saints Row was. So it is one of those things where it's like, I know when I have a time to play, or if I do get to catch it on a good sale, I think I'll get my money's worth. But again, we're special cases, not to belittle the general public with the game.
Steve, let me tell you something. You stomached more Saints Row 2022 than I did. You could absolutely stomach this game. It's not like, and that's the one thing I will say, the one takeaway where it's like, this game has a lot of issues. Is it a complete trash, like dumpster fire, like the way some people are talking about it? I don't think so. Like, personally, I heard the one thing I hear a lot is that this game is worse than Avengers. And I could not disagree more. As somebody who played the hell out of Avengers and played the hell out of both, I've played both. I think this game is way better than Avengers personally, because my problem with Avengers was I didn't like the gameplay and I didn't like the story, and I didn't like the gameplay loop in general. And what I did like about the game was that it was kind of centered around Kamala Khan at the time, where we had not a lot of media about her. That was like a really redeeming thing. And then they added a lot of characters, and it was cool, but I didn't like that game pretty much at all. This game, Like, it has its issues, its technical issues. Is the story the best thing in the world? No. But I think if you're a Batman fan, you're getting pretty much what you'd want out of a game for the most part. Yes, it's not Arkham levels of, like, fan service, but generally speaking, like, you're seeing a lot of the characters people like, and, you know, for the first time, we're actually getting to play as the Bat family, and I think they did a pretty solid job at it. There are lots of characters that me as a Batman fan would love to see them add as DLC, for example. I think it's perfectly designed to add, like, Spoiler and Orphan later on, and characters like that, or like Huntress, for example, or Black Canary. Like, there's lots of opportunities for them to add different characters that I would think would fit into this, that actually are technically in the game, but you don't see them. They email you. So you'll see their communications. But yeah, this game is, like, perfectly designed to be adding those characters, and I think it's also well designed to have, like, really quality story around it in a way that I think it just puts it way better than Avengers, because, like, I mean, all I need to say is Spider-Man in Avengers. That's all I need to say. Nothing in this game is that clunkily designed. No way. Is the combat, you know, leave a little bit to desired at times? Are the abilities a little meh? You know, are the case files that intriguing? No. And I think maybe Gotham Knights could have did a better job differentiating itself from some of the source material in terms of, like, if you play, like, Arkham Knight or, like, Arkham City, like, all these different Arkham games, they all diverted, I think, from the comic so much that they became their own thing, the Arkhamverse, you know? This game, I think, is straight out of the New 52 run for the most part, with a little bit of rebirth in there. So for the most part, I'm not getting anything narratively that I've not seen before, kind of done better. And that, I think, is something to hold against. But again, if you're not a huge Batman fan, I don't think you would notice that, to be honest. Like, I think you and I would probably notice, like, oh yeah, I've seen this before. Like, if you know the Court of Owl story, you could kind of figure out where this is all going. If you know what Clayface does on a normal basis, or Mr. Freeze, or Harley Quinn, you can kind of figure out where this is all going. But, you know, for anybody who's not, like, a massive Batman fan that can, like, predict these things, I think for the most part you can get a kick out of it. So I just wanted to kind of nip that in the bud. This game is way better than Avengers. I don't know what people are talking about.
I'm looking forward to it. I actually am really looking forward to it. All right, so that's all we've been playing. So we can jump right into the stories on some stuff that we hope one day to play. We'll see how this works out. So we kind of mentioned it, I believe, on the last episode. CD Projekt Red had laid out a little timeline of things they're working on, and we got a more full-on reveal on one of the projects. So it's actually kind of worked out that we waited. So obviously they're going all in on the Witcher series continuing, the Cyberpunk series continuing, and small hints at a new IP. So at their first project, which is Orion, it's a code name for our next Cyberpunk game, which will take the Cyberpunk franchise further and continuing harnessing the potential of this dark future universe. Orion will be developed by a brand new CD Projekt studio set up here in the US, which is interesting. So yeah, the follow-up for Cyberpunk 2077, I don't know what it would even be called. It can't be 2077 2, 2078.
Yeah,
I don't really... the endings I know of in Cyberpunk 2077, you really can't do a sequel to, at least in many ways. So I'm assuming it's going to be its own individual story, which I think it should be. What are you feeling on that first project?
Yeah, well, I'm glad to see. Well, one thing, you and I both did like Cyberpunk despite its significant issues. So I'm really glad to hear that they're not abandoning it, which I did not expect, judging by the investment in so much media surrounding Cyberpunk 2077, you know, Edge Runners and all that. I was like, this is going to be a universe that they're investing in, but I'm glad to see confirmation fully that there is going to be a proper sequel to this. And I think the only thing that anybody could say is the current state of what 2077 is right now, this minute. Do not release Orion until it's in the exact same state. That's the only thing. Like, you cannot afford another fumble in that same way. And I think a rushed CD Projekt game, we now can see how bad things can get. So please leave it alone. But the good thing about Orion now is that because of 2077, they can't really like overpromise, underdeliver thing anymore, because we know what Cyberpunk is now. Once upon a time, what they were saying, I mean, was this insanely immersive world with apparently so much verticality, and there's hovercraft and all that. Like, none of that's in the game. But now we know exactly what 2077 is. So we know now it's a sequel to that. Okay, cool. We can temper our expectation. I don't think there's going to be this major blowback this time. And I think one of the biggest issues with 2077 not only was the technical issues, but what people's expectations were. And I think those were fair expectations. Orion is a whole different ballgame where we won't have to go into it like that. So I'm actually quite excited for it. I liked Cyberpunk, and I just hope that they do it kind of right this time. And I just hope if they do it right up front, we can get the things like the story expansions. But I agree with you completely. I seriously doubt there's going to be surrounding V for a couple of reasons. One thing is that if anybody who's played Cyberpunk knows that like Night City has so many different players and factions and stuff. There's no real reason to actually have the same protagonist. There's so many different directions they could go. I mean, V themselves can be 3 different people, depending on the path you go. So that's what I'm saying. Like, no centralized V even exists in 2077, let alone a sequel. The endings change, like, for the most part, they're out of the picture. So there are so many different paths that they can go that I'm really excited to kind of explore a little bit more. I'm looking forward to it overall. I like 2077. So, I'm happy to hear this. I'm just curious about timetables most of all. Is is how under development this is, and what is their expectations in terms of release date, and how does that fit into the timetable? Do they plan on significant support of 2077 up until Orion's release? Doesn't look like it, because it looks like they've already probably canceled the second story expansion DLC. So chances are we're going to get what we're going to get now, and then that'll be it, and then it'll probably go dormant. But what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think so too. The way they talk about it, I mean, that original timeline that they talked about obviously is completely scrapped. I believe they even talked about in an interview that this upcoming story DLC will be the last major DLC to 2077, and I'm okay with that. I'm okay with having a nice sort of cap off, being like, all right, we're done. We screwed up. We did our best to fix it again, and then we even gave you a little extra, in story DLC. So I expect this to be the only DLC we get to Cyberpunk 27. I kind of hope so, because I want everything else to be in Orion. And I feel exactly the same way you do. I actually even hope that I have mixed reviews. I have mixed feelings if I even want a, because V is a created character type situation. Yeah. I kind of hope that we don't get, in a certain way, I get the universe of Cyberpunk with the augments and everything making sense that your character is customizable and you are controlling a lot of how that V reacts. But when we see things, some of the best stuff in Cyberpunk were the other characters. You think about Panam, Judy, Jackie. You can't tell me those characters weren't written way better than anything you did for your V.
Oh yeah.
Especially now that we have like Edge Runners, where those characters were there. They were who they were. I'm not gonna spoil what happens in Edge Runners, but it wasn't a choose your own adventure type deal. So it's all a mix on what Orion could really be. I do hope they just really focus on it, and obviously it can't release anywhere near the state of what 2077 was. But I'm happy because I this is a universe that I'm really like, and I'm low key. I was playing this a little bit more on my Steam Deck. There was an incident with my Steam Deck, so I cannot play my Steam Deck right now.
Yeah.
So until it's returned to me. But I was doing a sort of second playthrough, and it was really, really good. It's really fun.
You were able to play it on Steam Deck? Like, did it actually run okay?
Yeah. So they did a good thing in the graphics setting. There is a just Steam Deck version.
Oh, I love when the developers do that.
I was like, oh yes, thank you so much. It still has like the yellow exclamation point, like it's not optimized, but again, go to the graphics setting. Obviously you can't have ultra.
Yeah.
Switch it to Steam Deck and it runs really well.
Awesome. Well, half the games I play were yellow exclamation point games anyway, so
Exactly. So, yeah, I'm glad more Cyberpunk coming. Take its time though, no rush. The next project, Polaris, which is the codename for the next installment in the Witcher series of games, which we recently announced was in pre-production and is the beginning of a new saga. We aim to release 2 more Witcher games after Polaris, obviously creating a AAA RPG trilogy. The full trilogy is tended to be released in a 6-year period, which
That's fast.
I don't like that at all. Not that I mind getting Witcher games that quickly. Your track record is not good. It's not really done well, but I'll give it all. Again, this is something we saw, I think, a teaser of last year or at the beginning of this year, where they had a new emblem, so it's going to be a new House of Witchers. Sure, there'll be some Easter eggs connecting to the previous trilogy with Geralt and everything, but I think it's good. I think now that Witcher has become pretty much mainstream now, doing a sort of restart makes sense, especially in a world that has so much lore and so many characters and things you can do prequel, you can do later on, you can do almost connectively at the same time that the Geralt's adventures were happening. It's interesting. I am worried about the whole 6-year period, in the sense that I don't believe it. There's going to be tons of delays in this project. I think the only way I would ever even see that working, and I'm not opposed to this, the Witcher games being smaller. I think Witcher 3 is a bloated game in a sense, and then they had those 2 giant DLCs, which were really good, but it was sort of like, didn't need to be that big. There were some side missions that were just super long and almost like their own mini game in Witcher 3, so unless they are planning to scale back that scope, which would be kind of weird, and I'm sure some people would have issues with, that's the only way I could see that work. But what are you feeling on Polaris?
Yeah, I mean, I'm excited. I love The Witcher. I think it's not like a hot take to be like, I mean, obviously that's their best franchise. I think Witcher is better than Cyberpunk, even though I love Cyberpunk. There's just, the Wild Hunt is just such an incredible game and such a timeless game, and it's like 7 years old and still is just incredible. But yeah, like the 6-year thing is weird for me, because it's like, I don't believe them. I think that's their intent. I think they expect to release 3 games in 6 years, but they cannot. It's not. I don't believe it is possible for CD Projekt Red to do what they did in Wild Hunt 3 times in 6 years. I just don't think that's possible. No. They might be able to do that once in 6 years, with what Wild Hunt is, just because, again, it's an incredibly robust game. Like, in terms of like fantasy Western RPGs, like, I think it's pretty much at the top of the chain. You could argue, yeah, like Skyrim is there. I think, and maybe this is a hot take, I think Witcher 3 kind of usurped Skyrim. I just think Elder Scrolls has more like brand recognizability, but in terms of like a fantasy open world RPG, I think the characters, the world, the level design, like the different missions you're doing, the lore, I think it's all top-notch stuff. And I think it's just, how do you do that level of robust and interconnectedness and just being able to really like, there are people who still almost full-time play Witcher to this day, like all the time on streams, because that's just how much is in that game. Like, I played that game hours and hours and hours for many years, and I probably played like maybe 20% of that game, probably 25, because there's just so much that I don't have time to get to. So yeah, no, like, I'm excited to see what the future is, and I'm so glad that they're doing more of it. But I don't like the idea of them having like this fixed window that we're gonna do like 3 games in. Like, I just don't think that's a good idea. That reminds me a little of like, again, like the MCU Star Wars style, where it's like, we have this fixed timeline and we're just going to start pumping things out, because eventually it becomes a quantity game, not a quality game. And I think it's totally fine for them to be like, we're going to do a new Witcher trilogy. Awesome. Love that. And I would prefer if they're like, and it's going to take how long it takes, whatever. We're going to make a game, and you'll get the first game when the first game's done, and you'll get the second game when the second game's done, and the third game. Like, I don't like the idea of them being like, you're going to get all this and it's going to fit within 6 years. I mean, like, that's 1 console cycle's worth of time. And 3 full Western RPGs, like, that's not easy to do. Like, and if you look at all the major AAA players, like, most of them can't do that. Like the closest one that I think can output that to that speed is maybe like an Insomniac, because they're weird, and I don't know how they do that.
I don't know how they're doing it.
I don't know how they're doing that either. But if you look, like, BioWare couldn't do stuff like that at that level. Like, when their output sped up, look what happened. We got Anthem and Andromeda. And even that took pretty big gaps. Naughty Dog takes a while. Rockstar takes a while. Santa Monica takes a while. So the idea that, like, CD Projekt Red, which again has been around for a while, but in its current incarnation is still relatively new. The idea that they could output Wild Hunt 3 times in 6 years, I just don't think that's possible. I think that's their intention. I think they're going to try for it. And I think 3 games may come out in 6 years. I think it may happen. It ain't going to be Wild Hunt. There's no way. It's impossible. No. They're either going to make them shallow, or they're going to just or they'll be big, but they'll be not as well made, probably. Because, again, that's a quantity thing, and I don't like the quantity game because it's never ended particularly well. And so I'd prefer them to make the trilogy in the time that it takes. And if that takes 10, 15 years, so be it, so long as they're all classics. Because then you end up on the other side where it's like, holy crap, Wild Hunt was so incredible. We didn't think they could do that again. They did it 3 more times. How did they do that? Like, that's what I would love to see them arrive on the other side. But I understand, like, stakeholders are like, nah, we want those Wild Hunt checks, like, every 2 years. Oh, hell yeah, do that. I just don't think that that's possible. And I think franchise fatigue is a real thing, too, as well. So I think they need to be careful of that. Where, like, if you're getting a new Witcher game every 2 years, it's going to be diminishing returns each time. And I just hope that with diminishing returns naturally having the output, that the quality doesn't dip to the point where, like, by the time you get to the 3rd game, Witcher is a joke. That can happen, and I don't want that to happen. So that's my only concern. But again, as of right now, Witcher 3 is great. The show is really great too. So they're treating the narrative with care, even though obviously the show is based on, like, the source material. But right now, the Witcher name in the general populace is in a good place right now. So I just hope they're able to maintain that.
Yeah, again, and that's where a lot of this mixture comes in. It's like what a 6-year period. That's a long time. That's a whole. That'll obviously be well into the next generation of consoles. Yeah. So it is interesting. But yeah, I mean, Witcher is going through some changes. I mean, even on the Netflix series, where Henry Cavill is being recasted. So there's a lot of,
is he?
Oh yeah, actually. So this kind of just broke yesterday. It's like a small diversion. So season 3 of The Witcher will be coming out with Henry Cavill. He is being replaced by I always forget his name. Thor's brother.
Liam
is going to be taking the spot of Geralt.
I could see it.
Which, yeah, I can see it. Again, I don't know what that means, obviously. So there's a lot of just Witcher is just so popular. And again, that's another big name. Obviously, Henry Cavill just got on board again as Superman. He's just also very, very busy. So it makes sense. So again, everything's just being up in the air with Witcher. Again, so much can happen in a 6-year period. But we'll see. And prove us wrong. That's my big thing. Prove me wrong.
Oh, yeah, I'd love that.
Prove me wrong, CD Projekt Red. Prove me wrong that you can do this and knock out the park.
Yeah, if you could do it, but I'm doubtful.
Yeah. The next project it was Project Canis Majoris, but we now know that it is the full remake of The Witcher in Unreal Engine 5. We got a little title card thing they showed a couple days ago. And this is something that I kind of was always hoping for. For the main aspect that I've played the first Witcher, it is a PC game through and through. Like, to even slash, you have to, like, swipe your mouse. So it only lives on PC. There is no way to play this game anywhere else, I believe. So it is good that they're gonna kind of go back and retro do this. They probably will do this. I would see if this is a success. I don't see why they wouldn't do this with 2, The Witcher 2, which only ever released on 360 and PC. I don't think it ever came to PlayStation consoles in any form. So this makes sense. Again, The Witcher is just, that first game does need a lot of work. It's not something you can just sort of upscale and do. There's a lot of fixing, and I'm sure there's going to be some retconning and things just so the games are forever forward be able to be playable. We just saw them do this with Resident Evil, obviously, so that would be fine. Any quick thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, I think this is great. Funnily enough, I don't think much about the original Witcher. Like, sometimes I forget that Wild Hunt is the third game. I've played the second one. I've never touched the first game. I've never even looked it up, so I don't know much about it. But from what I've heard, it's kind of like prohibitively like old, like not good feeling. So yeah, no, this is great. I'd love to jump into this because it's sure as hell not jumping into the old one. At first, when I heard this story, I misread it and thought they were talking about Wild Hunt being remade, and I was like beyond confused. I was like, why? Like, why? But no, when I found out it was the first one, I was like, oh, that's great, because yeah, I hope they remake 1 and 2, to be honest with you, so you can kind of have that clean experience. Like, if they can do what Last of Us just did, basically, and just bring it up to speed on parity with the current game, so you can kind of go through that trilogy all seamlessly, I'd love that. But obviously these are not like, but thankfully Witcher 1 and 2 are a lot smaller than Wild Hunt is, so it's a lot more manageable. So I really do hope that this remake does well, so they can remake 2 as well, because I'd love to revisit that as well, and I kind of don't want to go back to the 360 version. So yeah, no, I'm really happy about this.
Yeah, really, really good stuff.
Do you know anything about Fool's Theory? I don't know much about that team.
Neither do I don't know. I don't even know.
I wonder if they've done anything, or are they new?
We're gonna do this in real time. The game developed. That's the team name, right? Fool's Theory?
I believe so, yeah.
Alright, so I'm on their website really quickly right now. And it is okay. So they're actually just sort of, so this is that's weird. So on their website, they're 2015 were founded, headquarters. They don't have a full game under their own title. It looks like they've sort of contributed Baldur's Gate 3, Divinity, Original Sin 2 DLC, Hellblade: Senua's Sacrifice, Outriders scored. Okay. It looks like they're more of a support studio. Yeah, big Xbox, but also support studio. Big team.
Interesting.
But right on their website, the only thing they have on here is join our team and then the Witcher remake. So
yeah, so they're pretty new.
So they're still
only
pretty
7
new,
years old,
and they're just all their credits are project support. So
interesting.
Again, under the right guidance, that could be a good thing.
Yeah, it's a big task, but remakes is how some great studios have gotten started. Anyways, I mean, if you look at like Bluepoint. I mean, they were just making stuff at first. So, yeah, no, I hope they do a great job with them, because who knows, they might become kind of the next Bluepoint.
Yeah, that's very true. That's very true. The next project, Sirius, a codename for the game developed by the Molasses Flood, set in the Witcher universe, created with support from CD Projekt Red. It will differ from our past productions, offering multiplayer gameplay on top of single-player experience, including a campaign with quest and story. So it seems to be some sort of, I'm going to think probably half live service, half, single player kind of game. Depending what it really ends up being, and maybe it's a less RPG, more straightforward action style game. I guess it would kind of have to be if you're incorporating multiplayer. I don't really know what that equals out to be. But what do you think?
Yeah, it entirely depends on what this is. When I first read that description, my mind immediately went to ESO, for anybody, Elder Scrolls Online. And that's what my mind went to, which is like, okay, if like there's the Witcher next games coming out, and then you'll have the online version, that'll be like the Skyrim to the ESO. So that would be the online offering. I can't get into ESO technically. Like I have problems sometimes with like story-driven games being way too big and way too much side content, and I can't get through it all, and it's kind of overwhelming, and I eventually give up. And so that is multiplied by 10 a lot of the times with these online games, where they're designed to be endless, and that level of endlessness makes me anxious. I don't have time for that. So this will probably not be for me if it's like that. But if it's literally just like Witcher 3 or whatever the next Witcher game is, with the ability to run around the world with somebody else, that actually sounds really fun. I'd love to put together a little like a 4-player team and kind of do some missions together. I think that could be real fun. I don't know if that's how they're designing though. Multiplayer can mean a lot of different things. So I'm open to it, but I'm probably leaning more towards this is probably not going to be for me.
Yeah, that's what I can say. And then it all depends on really. I mean, the Molasses Flood is. I mean, I think if I'm wrong, I believe they're owned by CD Projekt Red now. But I think they did like the Flame and the Flood, Drake Hollow, which is a completely different style of game. So it'd be we'll have to see.
They're pulling in some very interesting teams, and like CD Projekt Red's become this like network very quickly, and I'm like, and I understand they're infused with some I believe some government money as well from the country that they're founded in, so that's pretty interesting as well.
Yeah, that is
like the ramp up has been significant, despite the fact that any other dev would have probably went defunct off of that Cyberpunk situation with the refunds and all that, like, but they've kind of just expanded since then, which is nuts.
Yeah, well, It is interesting. And I mean, doing it with your flagship IP too is
it's bold.
Bold. Yeah. The last project they talked about, Hadar, a codename for our third entirely distinct IP curated from scratch within CD Projekt Red. The project is in the earliest stages of the creative process, which means we are not developing any game yet, but working exclusively on the foundation for this new setting. I think it's also cool that they're not. I mean, there's not much to say about this. They're not putting all their eggs in, the same two baskets. They're not just the Cyberpunk and Witcher guys. Think about Rockstar. They are GTA and Red Dead for a long, long time now. So it is nice that they are still trying to that creative juice again. It's hard when they're like not even developing anything yet. If anything's picking off the ground, I do like that it's within their own projects. The Witcher obviously was not their IP. Cyberpunk, not their IP. It's just something they've obviously got rights to and all that kind of stuff. But I think it is nice that all in all that they are at least still also trying to expand their library with other IP as well.
Yeah, that's a great point that they don't own their IP. I've actually never thought about that. The fact that they've inherited kind of both of those, with Cyberpunk being a board game, Witcher being a book series. I think it's smart for them to make another IP, but to be honest with you, when they said like we are not developing any game yet, part of me was sitting there like, okay, then why are you telling me? Like, like was this like a stakeholder thing that kind of made it out to everybody? I don't know. But yeah, this is. I wouldn't talk about this one if this doesn't. This, from what it sounds like, this is like an idea that they're like, oh, we'd like to do something else at some point. But like, if they don't have the setting locked in, they don't know what genre this is going to be, they're not developing anything yet. And I was like, I'd probably not mention this then, because then you're basically like, at some point I'd like to do something. And it's like, wouldn't we all? But like, when you have something, to show, or not even show, but at least locked in, like, hey, our next game is going to be a sci-fi game or a horror game or something. But if they're just like, I don't know, something, Hadar, there you go. It's like, all right, well, thanks for that, but I don't know what to do with that.
Yeah, it's same. That's how I feel. I'm like, if with no concept art, with no idea, with no sort of anything else to tell me besides we're working on another thing, I don't want to hear it. Thank you, though. Yeah,
I think they have enough kind of in development and enough to announce where they don't think they need to like scrounge up news for people. Like, you know what I mean? Like, they have enough in the works and so many moving parts and so many exciting things kind of baked up for the future that I don't think they really need to talk about this quite yet. I'd say, get your Witcher stuff all out, get your Orion out and your Cyberpunk stuff out, and then look towards the future. And then if you have something to talk about with this next IP, then or if that's going to come in somewhere in between that. Yeah. Like, if that's going to come in within the next, 5 to 6 years, then, talk about it. But for right now, I'd hold it back, because this is almost like the new version of what like Bethesda did that one time where they showed Starfield and then the next Elder Scrolls game, and these are like unbelievably far away. Like, just or specific, at least Elder Scrolls is like Starfield's coming, but with Elder Scrolls being far away. And for the longest time, like, people made fun of them because they're like, they didn't really have anything to show, and this is like 10 years off, but there's like, at some point this will come out. This is like the new version of that, where it's like, we don't have a name, we don't have a genre, we don't have a setting, we're not making this game yet, but it does exist in our hearts and minds. It's like thanks for that. For that, CD Projekt Red.
Yeah.
All right, so I guess we can move on to the next one. Resident Evil showcase happened. They held another, Capcom held another digital showcase dedicated to all things Resident Evil, and we got a couple really cool announcements. So we got a new trailer for the Winters expansion. Did you get a chance to see this trailer yet?
Well, I mean, I saw the trailer, but that's also what
that
I played.
That was what you were playing, right?
So the Winters expansion, it consists of Shadow of Rose, some mercenary add-on, and then the third-person mode for the main campaign. And I talked about my feelings about the at least the story part. Again, I haven't tried too much. I don't want to do the survival mercenaries mode right now. I'm sure I'll get to it around since it's installed. But I mean, all for $20, not a bad get.
Yeah, the third person's actually kind of interesting too because it kind of brings it in parity with the older ones, and that's one thing. Like, I'm not the biggest Resident Evil fan, but whenever I see like mods and stuff like that of making like the newer games look old, I can't help but like smile. Where it's like it just brings it back to when I did play a lot of it back with 4. Next one, Resident Evil Reverse, still coming out later this month, which is hilarious just because this game, if that sounds familiar to you, that's because it was supposed to come out with Village and a series of weird, or shortly after, within the window. And then a number of delays happened, and it got pushed off, and it got pushed off, and it got pushed off, and now finally we're here, and apparently it's coming. Or at least, is this out yet?
No, it's there's a later date for it. You can launch it. You've always been able to download something.
But you can't play it yet, right?
You can't play it yet. I downloaded it again, obviously, when I installed Village again, and it crashed my PS5, so I didn't even launch it again.
Yeah.
It's there at least it's free for those who bought Village, and I'm sure a lot of people, the sales speak that a lot of people have. I think this is just something they have to do now because it's been promised.
Yeah, it's like one of those things that like at some point was going to be a thing and then got pushed off to the point where like now it's kind of like, okay, like what are we doing here? Like who is this for? Nothing they've shown so far looks particularly great to me. I love Resident Evil, but they don't have the best track record with these spin-off games. Like a lot of the times when there's these side, I believe also like the 3 remake came with like this survival mode thing. That's true. That was also not great. So a lot of times they have these kind of like side kind of tacked on content. I figured at first that Reverse was just going to be what they did with 3, just with Village. And then, the weird delays happened. I hope it does well for them, for people who are into those type of games, but it doesn't look particularly good to me at all.
Yeah, me neither.
Next one, Resident Evil Village is coming to Mac, and the past games are getting a Nintendo Switch Cloud versions, which I've already kind of seen popping up and everything like that. Quickly for me, I don't play on Mac, and I'm not interested in cloud versions anymore. And a Nintendo Switch Cloud version lost what little tiny 1% relevance they had to me as soon as the Steam Deck came out. Where it's like I have no need to ever play a game cloud handheld again because I have a handheld that can natively play all these things. And so I'm assuming you have no interest in these specific ports at all?
No, not at all. Again, cloud versions on Switch really don't run well, and then because of the Steam Deck, I mean, I think 2 months ago I mentioned it, I have every Resident Evil up to 7 on Steam now for like $30 through Humble Bundle, and I could play them all on my Steam Deck, so download it onto it. So as soon as I see Cloud Edition, I already just tune out to the max.
Yeah, and it's kind of in concept a terrible way to play Resident Evil, in my opinion, just with how beautiful and how great they run on all the different consoles. To play it on, the Switch, it kind of defeats the purpose of a lot of Switch, and that's the problem with. I see a lot of these games where they talk about having cloud versions on Switch, and it's like I just. Like, and I understand this. The Switch for some people is their primary console, so things like this are going to happen. You're gonna get like 2K 2022 is finally out on Switch, and it's like, what the hell? Like, all right, but part of me is kind of just like, for me, Nintendo Switch is a very specific thing. That's where like the Splatoons come, the indie games go, Pokemon's, Bayonetta I think is a solid fit. Even though I'd love and very much prefer to play Bayonetta on my PS5, I'd love that. But if I can't, I think it's a good fit. I think Danganronpa games are great on Switch. Like, there are great things that fit for Switch, but this is not one of them for me. And then lastly, new gameplay of Resident Evil 4 Remake and the pre-orders have started. This game looks amazing. I don't think anybody had doubt about them. Capcom has done a wonderful job remaking their game so far. And we already knew that 4 was happening. Now we're starting to see some footage that is directly connected to different scenes that we've seen in 4, so we can finally get those really good, like, kind of before and after comparisons between the original 4 and then the 4 remake stuff. They've made some changes. It looks like some very minor changes. Some people have been able to dissect from the trailer to the game. But overall, I'm very, very excited about this. I have played most of the remakes. I haven't played all of them. Like, I played 1 remake many years ago. I played 2. I didn't really play that much of 3. I watched 3 played. But 4, I'm absolutely jumping into because this game looks amazing. What are you thinking?
No, yeah, absolutely. I was always weary about how you remake Resident Evil 4 because it's been upscaled so constantly. There's native PS4 versions and Xbox One versions. But yeah, they knew how to blow me out the water. They completely got me. Everything looks great. The models look great. I was worried because I remember when Resident Evil 4 VR on Oculus came out, there was a lot of like censoring and some editing, and they made Leon seem a little less goofy. And it seems some of that at least is in here. I'm sure some of these lines have been changed, but you know, right in that trailer where he's like, "Where's everybody at playing bingo?" or whatever that line is, the bingo line, that seems to be in there. So it does obviously look like the faithful remake that we've wanted. I'm sold. I don't need to see any more. They gave us the release date too. I want to say it was March.
Yeah, it's March.
So kind of roughly where all the other remakes have kind of landed, like that sort of winter, early springtime. And I think that's perfect because I think people don't underestimate how big Resident Evil 4 is because it's going to be a big title.
Yeah, this is a major deal because I think the moment that they announced, I remember 2, when 2 was getting remade, what lots of people were excited about Resident Evil 2 is, I think, the hardcore Resident Evil, a lot of their favorite one. But that was the first thing I thought of, which is like eventually I hope that they remake 4 because that is going to be a game changer. Because the sheer amount of people that jumped onto Resident Evil at 4 have a lot of nostalgia for 4. Consider 4 to be one of their favorite Resident Evils or some people's favorite game of all time. It's going to be a different ballgame. There's going to be people who haven't paid attention to Resident Evil in a while who are probably going to jump into this remake. And so this is definitely going to be, if they stick the landing, which I don't think there is any reason to think they won't. They've so far been on a pretty solid run lately for Resident Evil. You know, like 2 remake was great. 3, you know, the thing is, the source material of 3 was never like the best game in the world. So I think they did the best they could with what they had. But like, you know, Village was good, Biohazard was good, and so here we are with the 4 remake. I think they're going to stick the landing, and I think this is absolutely Game of the Year contender right here for next year if they're able to nail it. Like I think it would be hard pressed for the Resident Evil team in general. I think would be hard pressed to probably pass what they're about to make here, because it effectively, in my opinion, is one of the best narratives. And they're going to remake it with basically great modern gameplay. I mean, that's kind of the perfect Resident Evil experience for me, as far as I'm concerned. Again, one of the best narratives. I say one of the best because everybody has different opinions about what the best Resident Evil story is. I've always preferred 4's story. I like other games' gameplay. Like I don't love 6's story, but I kind of like the gameplay of 6, for example. Yeah. But that, you know, everybody has their different preferences. But yeah, 4 remake I think is going to be a force, and I think some people are sleeping on that fact, of the fact that they're like, oh cool, another remake. I liked 4. There's good nostalgia there, but I think some people are not really taking into effect like how much of a shakeup in the industry this is going to be because of the sheer amount of people who've been waiting for this. Like, this is the one people have been waiting for. So yeah, and this is the reason why I felt like they might not do it. Is because I think the expectations were way higher for this one than the others. You know, 2 and 3 were effectively dormant games when they remade them. Like, they were so prohibitively old that people they were just left on the PS1 at that point. And when they remade them, a lot of people's expectations weren't really there because a lot of people, the 2 and 3 remakes were their first time playing those games. with 4, that's been kept pretty contemporary. We've had consistent releases since it came out, and if as you said, like if you wanted to play PS4 or Resident Evil 4, there was a million different ways you can do that. That looked pretty good and ran pretty good, and there's nothing wrong with it. So I didn't think they were going to actually touch this game. I felt like the scrutiny combined with the accessibility of it would motivate them to maybe go for like a Code Veronica before they went for this. But I'm glad they proved me wrong, because this game looks amazing.
No, absolutely, and it's I'm really anticipating this game. I really can't wait for this one.
Yeah, for sure.
All right. So last story, we have sort of an update. We kind of knew there would be an update. We were at least kind of hoping one on the Bayonetta 3 voice act situation. So quickly, I'll read. Last episode, we spoke about the conflict between former Bayonetta voice actress Helena Taylor and Platinum Games. While following her initial statements, articles from Bloomberg's Jason Schreier and VGC's Andy Robinson, some of the most credible people out there, despite what you think of them personally, which cited multiple sources and documentation that contradicted Taylor's account. She was offered only $4,000 to reprise her role as Bayonetta. The reports suggest that Platinum Games had attempted to hire Taylor for up to five 4-hour sessions, paying $3,000, $4,000 a sitting, which the total fee would have amounted to roughly $15,000, which was significantly more than Taylor had been paid for previous titles, according to VGC. Taylor had reportedly turned this offer down and sought a 6-figure sum and residual payments in exchange for her involvement with the project. In a series of tweets, Taylor said that the initial offer from Platinum Games, which she rejected, would have amounted to $10,000 in total, and following her correspondence with Hideki Kamiya, she was offered an additional $5,000. Taylor says she declined the $15,000, and 11 months later, she also turned down an offer of $4,000 to voice some lines as a flat fee. According to Taylor, there was no extensive talks, and claims that she was offered $4,000 for 5 recording sessions, and in her own words, total fabrications. Furthermore, she denies she negotiated for a 6-figure payment. So unfortunately, I'm not too much to say about this. It is unfortunate that we have a lot of he said, she said, but from Jason Schreier and Andy Robinson, they have seen a lot of documentation. They do their due diligence before reporting on anything. It does seem... I'm not here to call anyone a liar. It does seem Helena Taylor at least bent some of the information to fit her narrative. I think someone with, this is would have been her third game as Bayonetta. I do think, and it's hard because I don't pay anyone for voice acting. I'm not in that culture. I do think $15,000 is pretty low for that. But again, if that's being more than what she got for the first 2 games, it's a little bit of a mix. As much as Bayonetta is a cool series, it's something that this series I've sort of just gotten into. The games don't really sell that well. I know it's a huge series. I know it makes a lot of money, just because how long it's been. But I think, and that has kind of partial to being locked on the Switch, I think anyway. It does seem that there was some sort of lying here, and it's still, even though it was still, I think, a lowball offer, it wasn't the complete disrespect offer that she was kind of claiming. I think there is still just a lot of mixture of what's true, what's not true. She still calls for people to boycott the game, and she put some questionable charities, she put a list of charities up. She said, I'd rather you guys donate to these. They were... Not to get into that, there were some questionable choices on there, if you look at some of those companies. So it is unfortunate. I do think, and she's called for it too, where she's like, I'm done talking about this, it's over. I think the fact that she was like, well, no, that's what they say is not true. She already broke NDA, so I'm surprised she didn't even... If she had proof, she could have just posted proof that this was false.
Beware of my rules.
Beware of my rules. Yeah. Not to stand with Kamiya either. He is a character.
I love that statement though. It's crazy.
Yeah, I wanted that on a shirt. But I do think, unfortunately, I do think this. I'm not glad that this happened. There is a sort of talks again about voice actors and if they're paid, underpaid, and everything like that. I do think it's unfortunate that it had to be almost this personal thing. Helena Taylor, because of the proof that Bloomberg and VGC was able to get and that Platinum has, she's going to be probably pretty hard to work with now, if not completely blacklisted, incomplete. So it is unfortunate in that sense, but at least this sort of really bad situation sort of put to rest. She no longer wants to discuss it. I don't think she will be discussing it. I don't think Camilla, hopefully, praise the Lord, does not speak about it anymore. The game's out. I think it's selling pretty well. Even despite this controversy, it was like up on the top sold Switch games, even beating out some other titles that usually sit up there. So what was your sort of final reaction stomaching all this?
Yeah, it's a tricky thing, and that's why I'm so glad last time that we covered this that we kind of withheld judgment fully, because we knew that, you know, we were hearing one story, and it's not that I was like, oh, Helena Taylor is an incredible witness or she's a liar or whatever, but more so like I just wanted to hear what Platinum had to say about all this so we can get some more context and information and whether they confirm or deny what she said and what their perspective is. First and foremost, it's a real shame that all of this kind of culminated in basically a hate train directed towards kind of like everyone involved, where you know, like Helena got what some would consider her just dues, but then also like Jennifer Hale got a lot of flack, which is totally not fair for her, because again, she accepted a job that was offered to her and did the best that she can, and now she's getting kind of like shat on unnecessarily because of Helena's statement and actions. I don't think that's fair either, and you know, Platinum is standing with her, and I think that's kind of unfair. But yeah, it's a tricky thing. The whole lying situation, at the very least, you could consider it lying by omission, where there's the idea that, yeah, like she did say that she was offered $4,000, and they basically counteracted that and proven that it was $4,000 per session. That is a big difference. The difference, you know, like the way Helena was speaking at first, it was 4,000 gross, like total, like you know, overall. That's an $11,000 difference. Now, I agree with you completely. $15,000 for the third game in a series from a veteran actress for an IP that's owned by Nintendo seems insanely low. 100% get that. And if I were her, I totally understand seeing that offer and it's like, I'm sorry, that's not going to work for me. And then kind of letting negotiations fall through. And yeah, sometimes you counter, you send a counter offer. And to be honest with you, like, is 100,000 with residuals? Does that sound like a lot? Sure. But to be honest with you, you know, like $100,000 salary in some, you know, tech companies and stuff like that is not unheard of. And getting back end, you know, stock options or residuals or like getting royalties, for example, is not unheard of. But it's a hard ask. I get why a company might not want to give you any back end money, because again, this is a corporation. So I get like why they'd be like no. And then that's where this should have ended, to be honest with you. You know, like, okay, she counter offered, they said no, they couldn't come to a deal. That's fine. And then they move on. I'm sure that happens all the time. You know what I mean? I think she should ask what she's worth, and they should pay what they're able to pay. And if honest to God, Platinum don't got it like that, and that's just not in the budget for it, all right, that's not in the budget for it, and then somebody will take the money who is comfortable with that amount, so be it. And even if she felt insulted by that, which she has every right to feel how she wants to feel, that's totally fine. But I'm a little confused about her strategy there, because at that point then she runs online and releases this statement and effectively tries to organize a boycott against the game. All right, cool. That is the actions of someone, in my view, who maybe never anticipated to work in this field again. Because it's a lose-lose situation. Because that means you're standing on your morals, which is totally fine. But the thing is, if you're going to stand on your morals, you would want to stand on the side of, like, facts. You know what I mean? Like, verifiable fact. Like, hey, even if they drop the contract, I'm putting myself out there. So you'd think that, like, hey, if I'm going to stand on social media screaming this, are you really going to call a company's bluff because you don't think that they're going to drop the numbers, you know, or the numbers that would at least make it out? Because Platinum at no point dropped the contract, but they had sources that are able to verify these things. So she kind of needlessly exposed herself, and kind of put herself out there when she herself knew that. I mean, unless, if you want to give her the full benefit of the doubt, she misremembered, or I seriously doubt that somebody as experienced as her misread the contract. You know what I mean? Like, this is, I seriously doubt that. So yeah, it seemed like maybe she was just trying to push a particular narrative, which 100% might be a valid one, which is these companies are underpaying their voice actors and actresses. Totally valid. That's fine. But I think she was more concerned about a desired outcome and doing what she needed to get to that outcome rather than just putting the facts that, as they were out there. And it was like a lose-lose situation because, those who didn't believe her were not going to work with her because they think she's a liar. So that's where you get into the Platinum territory. She'll never work with Platinum again. And probably Nintendo in general, as the one who kind of owns this IP. You're trying to organize a boycott against a Nintendo IP. Nintendo's never going to work with you again. So that's that. And then even people who were on her side. Think about you as a company, Steve. Let's say you're a game developer. And let's say you do agree with her. You believe her. But you know that in the event you're not able to make a deal with her because she doesn't feel respected by your offer, she's going to run to Twitter with all that information. Yeah. F the NDAs, whatever rapport you might have. Again, this is the third game in this franchise she was going to work on. 3 games in, and you guys don't come to a deal. She knows you personally. You best believe she knows Kamiya. And this deal falls through, and she runs to Twitter with that. You as somebody who, even if you support her, would you comfortably hire her in the future?
Yeah, exactly. That's
no,
exactly the point.
So she shot herself in the foot here, where it's like even those who would support her, me, I 100% support creatives, and if I was a video game developer, I would love to pay as much as possible to make sure that they're able to support themselves. But even I would be apprehensive because I would know that, like, hey, I can't negotiate in good faith with this voice actress without fear that she's going to try to stir a hate train against my company in the event that things fall through. That's not somebody you want to work with. So, unfortunately, that people are talking about, like, oh, they're going to blacklist her. Now, I feel like she kind of blacklisted herself. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, that's how I see it.
She kind of Kanye'd herself a little bit where in the game industry where it's like she's kind of become an untouchable individual to work with because no company in good faith can work with her without fear of her trying to stir a hate mob against you, which PR is so important when it comes to marketing a product. In the retail space, word of mouth is everything. Ad space is cool, and getting your product out in the stores is cool, but word of mouth is so important about what people are talking about and communicating about your game. And if you're gonna soil what people are talking about, the number one headline about our game a week from release is about us trying to exploit our voice actors. Like, come on now. I could see why people would be frustrated about that. Because mind you, there are hundreds, if dozens, if not hundreds of people who worked on this game whose livelihood could also be impacted by this. And to do that all for misrepresented numbers is confusing to me. It would be one thing if this was legit. Like, if they really lowballed her, would I run public? Probably not. But if she wanted to do that, that's her prerogative. If she's willing to, listen, I'm going to take the L, sacrifice my career to out this very pervasive issue. Look at what they're doing. That's one thing. It's another thing to do that action, and those numbers are not accurate. To the point where, popular voice actors are coming out and basically being like, she's kind of bugging out, you know what I mean, like that. It's just not a good look, and when there is a very strong movement, by involving people like Jennifer Hale, like Troy Baker, like Nolan North, for example, and then you see them even being like, bruh, you're you handled this all wrong. It's not a good look. And so I wish her the best, but part of me want a little insight into what was she thinking, really?
Yeah.
Is this a misremembering situation? Because none of her statements really, other than saying they're lying, which at this point, I mean, if Video Games Chronicle and Bloomberg, Jason Schreier's coming out and being like, bruh, and Andy Robinson is like, no, this is true. It doesn't seem like a Platinum's lying situation. So, what is your explanation for this? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I'm hoping that this is, giving her the benefit of the doubt. Maybe she honestly misremembered or didn't mean to misrepresent those numbers, and this is all a big misunderstanding, and she handled it wrong, and she emotionally kind of ran to social media incorrectly, and maybe she could bounce back from this. Maybe, I don't know, but I hope that I'm glad the game is doing well. It doesn't seem like, I think that did they lowball her for sure. but I think she handled this incorrectly. I think that's the ultimate takeaway, which is there is a way to handle contract negotiations and there's a way not to, and running to social media is one of the things that I think many generations of people could learn that is not the way to handle that situation.
No, absolutely. I completely agree.
Yeah, I think way too many people run to social media to air their grievances, and as you could see, that can kind of like shoot yourself in the foot more times than, especially when it comes to employment. You're free to go crazy and crap talk a company if you want, so long as you realize that their peers are watching you too. This is, and I think part of her, which is weird that this is a veteran actress, I feel like part of her felt that this was a Helena Taylor versus Platinum or a Helena Taylor versus Camilla situation, when she didn't realize that, hey, like, this is a Nintendo situation and this is a like game developer situation. Like, everybody's watching her. Like, do you think Naughty Dog's gonna run to hire her now? Do you think Rockstar's gonna run to hire her now? What? So like, you get pissed off at me one day and then you start atting our CEO? No thanks. like no thanks. I'm gonna pass on that. So I mean, I hope she has some savings. That's the best thing I could say. I hope she has something saved up.
Yeah, unfortunately, yeah.
Because that's Bayonetta 2 is going to be the last game we see her in.
Yep.
All right. Well, that was a story. I'm glad that we were able to do a little bit of follow-up. I hope that's where the story ends. I'd rather not see the messiness continue. When we're done here, I definitely want to know more about those links that she shared too, because I'm not aware of that. I definitely want to see what you're talking about there.
Oh yeah, go take a peek and look, and not about specifically who those companies, but who runs those companies and where the money goes.
Oh yeah, I gotta check that out. But all right, so that was episode 87 of the NeoVintage podcast. I'm Jabril, and I'm here with
Steve. Hope you guys enjoyed,
and we'll see you guys at the next episode.